We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Chesamid Beis Meseches Makkos. This is Makkos Daf 18b. On the previous summit, the Gemara quoted the statement of Rava. Rava said if you have a zar, a non-Kohen, who eats from a carbon ola and it's lifnei zrika and it's outside of the walls of Yerushalayim, so he says there's going to be five malchus in that situation. And the Gemara is now in the middle of asking why is there not an additional malchus? It should be from the pasuk of Lo Yochal Ki Kodesh Heim, because Rabbi Eliezer interprets that pasuk to mean Kol Shebekodesh Pasul, anything that is disqualified in Kodesh, Boha Kosav Litein Lo Saseh Al Achilas. So the pasuk over here is saying there's a Lo Saseh if one eats it. So in this case, where the non-Kohen is eating it Lifnei Zrika outside of the walls of Yerushalayim, that should be included. This Lo Saseh should be included. There should be an additional lav. And the Gemara answers to that, Hani Mili Hecha de Kodem Psulo Chazi. That's only true if before it was disqualified, it was fit to eat. But over here, we're talking about a carbon ola again. It's not supposed to be eaten anyway. To Kodem Psulo Nami Lo Chazi, even before the disqualification, it's not fit. And so therefore, there is no additional malchus for this particular lav. And the Gemara continues, Velilki Nami Ki Idach to Rabbi Eliezer. Why not get an additional malchus like the other teaching of Rabbi Eliezer? The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer says, Kolshu B'cholel Ti, anything that's totally burned on the Mizbeach, Litein Lo Saseh Al Achilasa, there's a Lo Saseh on eating that, and so therefore, again, that should be an additional lav in this particular case. And the Gemara says to that, Inochinami, yes, indeed, that is true. There actually is an additional lav. The Rava Mehai Kroko Amar, when Rava said that there are 5 lav and 5 sets of malchus, he meant from the particular pasuk that Rabbi Shimon was darshaning, but there could be other psukim, other violations that are involved. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Gidl Amar Rav. Rav Gidl says that Rav says, Kohen sha'achal mechatos v'yasham, if a Kohen eats from a carbon chatos or a carbon asham lifnei zrika, before the sprinkling of the blood, loka, he's going to get malchus. And the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason? Diyamar krutz, because the pasuk says, v'yachlu osam, and they will eat them, asher kupar bahem, that which they were atoned through them. And we understand that to mean, la'achar kapara, in, after kapara, meaning after the sprinkling of the blood, that's when they're allowed to eat. Lifnei kapara lo, but before the kapara, before the atonement, meaning before the zrika, they're not allowed to eat. That's an inference we make from this pasuk. And lav haba mechlal asay, lav hu, and if you have a negative commandment that's inferred from a positive, this pasuk is written as an asay, it's written in the positive, but we're inferring a negative that again, lifnei kapara, they're not allowed to eat. That's considered a lav, it's considered a negative commandment, and therefore there is malchus. And the Gemara continues, Mesiv Rava asks the following question. It says in the pasuk, V'chol behema mafreses parsa v'shosa shesa shtei parasos malas geira ba behema osato chelu. It says any animal that has split hooves and it chews its cud, you're allowed to eat that animal. And we can infer from that pasuk, Osa tochelu, you can eat that animal, ve'ein behema acheres tochelu, and you're not allowed to eat another animal, meaning that is a lav haba mechlal aseh. It's a negative that is inferred from a positive. V'iked the and if it's like you're saying, that when you have a negative inferred from a positive, that is considered a lav, it's considered a negative commandment. So as zel lo tochlu lamali, why does it have to say the negative commandment of this you should not eat? We've already said that. That's already inferred from the positive. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather itmar, if anything was stated, hachi itmar. This is actually what Rav Gidl said from Rav. Amar Rav Gidl Amar Rav. Rav Gidl said that Rav said, Zor sha'achal mechatos v'yasham lefnei zrika. We're not talking about a Kohen who eats from the chatos and asham before sprinkling the blood. We're talking about a Zor, a non-Kohen who eats from a chatos and asham lefnei zrika. And we're not saying gets malchus, but pater, on the contrary, is exempt. If the non-Kohen eats from the chatos and asham before zrika, Rav Gidl said from Rav that the Zor is pater, is not going to get malchus. And the Gemara explains my time, and what's the reason for this? Diyamar krutz, because the pasuk says v'achlu osam asher kupar bohem. It says they eat them, and there's this kapara, and we understand that as follows: Kol hecha de karinan bei v'achlu osam asher kupar bohem. As long as we understand, as long as we're in a situation where when they are eating from it, there is a kapara, meaning to say la'achar zrika, after the sprinkling of the blood. So then karinan bei v'zar lo yochal kodesh. Then we can apply the pasuk of v'zar lo yochal kodesh. We say there's a negative commandment if the non-Kohen eats. But if it's a situation of eating from them which is not a cause for kapara, meaning it's lifnei zrika, before the sprinkling of the blood, so lo karinan bei v'zar lo yochal, so then we cannot apply the pasuk of v'zar lo yochal, and that's why it's pater in this situation. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reb Elazar, Amar Reb Hoshia. Reb Elazar says that Reb Hoshia says, Bikurim, when it comes to Bikurim, Hanocha ma'akeves bohen, placing it before the Mizbeach, is ma'akev, it is required, and Kriyar, the reading of the Psukim, ein ma'akeves bohen, that is not required. And we had a machlokas tanoim about this on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, and Reb Elazar, Amar Reb Hoshia over here is going like the Chachamim again, that Hanocha is ma'akev, but Kriya is not ma'akev. But the Gemara continues, Umi Amar Reb Elazar Hachi, did Reb Elazar really say this? V'Amar Reb Elazar Amar Reb Hoshia, Hoshea, but Rabbi Elazar said that Rabbi Hoshea said, Hifresh bikurim kodem lechag. If somebody separates bikurim before Sukkos, v'yavar alein hachag, and then Sukkos passes, yirkavu, it should be left to rot. My love, is it not? The reason is as follows: Mishum delo motzi lemikri alein, because it's no longer possible to read the psukim after Sukkos. We'll see Rashi in a moment. But v'isal kadaitach kriya ein ma'keves ben. But if it should enter your mind that the reading is not required, amay yirkavu, so why do you have to let it rot? It shouldn't be a big deal that you can't read the psukim after Sukkos. And the Gemara answers to that, Kid Rabbi Zera. It's like Rabbi Zera said, the Yom Rabbi Zera, because Rabbi Zera said with regard to Karban Mincha, Kol Haroi Labila, if it's fit to be able to be mixed, Ein Bila Ma'akeves Bo, so then the mixing is not required. V'chol She'eno Roi Labila, but if it's not even able to be mixed, so Bila Ma'akeves Bo, then the Bila becomes a requirement that actually is problematic. And the same thing over here by the reading of the Psukim. You have to be able to read the Psukim. Since after Sukkos you're not able to read the Psukim, so that's problematic. But as long as you're able to read the Psukim, even if you are not, even if you don't actually read the psukim, it is not going to be ma'akev. And Rashi explains, Bikurim lefnei hachag, when it comes to Bikurim before Sukkos, b'nei kriya ninu, that's a period in time where you're still able to read the psukim. But liachar hachag, but after Sukkos, lav b'nei kriya ninu, it's not possible to read the psukim. Techsiv basar kriya, because after those psukim that are read, what does it say? It says, v'samachtu b'chol hatov, that you'll be happy. And me'atzeres v'yarachag, from Shavuos until Sukkos, shuz man simchas lakitas peiros, that's a time of simcha because you're collecting the produce, mevi v'korei, so then you're able to bring the Bikurim and you read from the psukim. But min hachag v'yad Chanukah, from Sukkos until Chanukah, maybe the Bikurim can still be brought ve'eno korei, but he's not able to read the psukim because again it's not the zman of simchas lakitas peiros. Hifresh lefnei hachag, again, if he separated the Bikurim before Sukkos, chola alein chovas kriya, now there's an obligation to read. V'yavar alein hachag, but now Sukkos passed, she'ein ru'uyin od lekriya, it's no longer fit, you're not able to read, so yirkavu, so then at that point in time, you have to let it rot. And the Gemara said, well, if it's true that kriya is not ma'akev, what's the big deal? And the Gemara ended up answering, Kid Rabbi Zera, it's like Rabbi Zera said, li'olam beru'uyin lekriya, lo ma'akva kriya, really, in a situation where at least you could theoretically read the psukim, so it's not ma'akev, it's not necessary to read the psukim. Avol be'elu sha'avar zmanan, but here where the time has passed, ve'enan ru'uyin od l'kriya, it's not possible to read anymore. Ma'akva kriya k'd Rabbi Zera, then already that's problematic. The fact that you can't read is going to be ma'akev, like Rabbi Zera says, the Yamar kol haroi labila, because he says by Karban Mincha, if it's fit to be mixed, that's all you need. It doesn't actually need to be mixed. But Meseches Menachos Tanan, in Meseches Menachos we learn in the Mishnah, Harei olai shishim v'echad isaron, let's say a person takes upon himself 61 isaron for Karban Mincha, maybe shishim b'kli echad, he brings 60 isaron in one vessel, v'echad b'kli echad, and then the other isaron he brings in another vessel, to add shishim yechol nivolel b'kli echad, because until 60 he's able to mix it properly with the oil in one vessel. Avol shishim v'echad, but if it's already 61, kimlu l'Rabbanan, the Rabbanan have established de'enon nivlol in yafa, that it is not mixed nicely. V'havinon bon, so we ask on that, v'chayenon nivlol in my hava, who cares if it's not mixed? V'anon tanam, but we learn the Mishnah, im lo bal al kosher, that even if it's not mixed, it's kosher. Umeshani Rabbi Zera answered, kol haroi labila, as long as it's able to be mixed, ein bila ma'akeves bo, whether you do the mixing or not, is not going to be ma'akev, it just has to be fit for that, it has to be able to be mixed, and the same thing over here, it has to be that you're able to read the psukim, but you don't have to actually read the psukim. And the Gemara continues, Rav Acha bar Yaakov masni lo kid Rabbi Asi amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, he taught what we just said above, in accordance with Rabbi Asi, that Rabbi Yochanan said, V'kash alei Rabbi Yochanan ad Rabbi Yochanan, ends up being for him a contradiction, a difficulty within Rabbi Yochanan. Rashi explains, Masni lo lahad Rabbi Elazar amar Rabbi Oshia, that which Rabbi Elazar amar Rabbi Oshia just said above, kid Rav Asi amar Rabbi Yochanan, he has it as a teaching from Rav Asi, from Rabbi Yochanan, the Rav Asi amar mishmei Rabbi Yochanan. Again, the Rav Asi said it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, as the Gemara now explains what becomes problematic. Umi amar Rabbi Yochanan, did Rabbi Yochanan really say, Bikurim, that when it comes to Bikurim, Hanocha ma'akeves ben, that the Hanocha, the placing it before the Mizbeach is ma'akev, is required, but Kriya ain't ma'akeves ben, but the reading of the Psukim is not ma'akev. Again, that's the exact same statement we just had above from Rabbi Elazar and Amar Rav Oshia. It said, Bikurim Hanocha ma'akeves ben, Kriya ain't ma'akeves ben, and so now the Gemara has that in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and the Gemara is asking, did Rabbi Yochanan really say that? V'aboy minei Rabbi Asi mi Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Asi asked Rabbi Yochanan the following question, Bikurim me'eimosai mutarin lekohanim, when it comes to Bikurim, At what point in time, from when is it mutter to the Kohanim? V'yamar lein, he said to him, Haru'uyin l'kriya, if it's fit, if you're able to read the psukim, mishakara alein, it's from the time that you read the psukim. And v'she'ein ru'uyin l'kriya, if you're not able to read the psukim, so misharo pnei habayis, so it's from the time that it sees the entrance, from the time essentially that it enters the Azar, it sees the entrance of the Beis HaMikdash. And so we have a contradiction over here. Kasha kriya kriya. We have a contradiction in terms of whether the reading is ma'akev. Again, we learned above that Rabbi Yochanan, if you have the statement that we just said above from Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Oshi, that's really Rabbi Yochanan, then kriya is not ma'akev. Kriya is not something that is required. And yet it's saying over here, haru'uyin l'kriya mishakara alein. So therefore we have a contradiction within kriya. And kasha hanocha hanocha. We also have a question when it comes to hanocha. Again, we're saying that the hanocha is ma'akev in the original statement of Rabbi Yochanan. And here it seems that hanocha is not ma'akev. And Rashi explains, Haru'uyin l'kriya, again the answer was that if you're able to read, me'atzeres v'yadachag, from atzeres until Sukkos, if you're in that period of time, from Shavuos until Sukkos, so then it's from the time that you read the psukim, again as if that is ma'akev. And then if it's not the time that you're reading, then it's mishayiru pnei habayis, when it sees the entrance, when it goes into the entrance of the Azara, it sees the entrance of the Beis HaMikdash, mishayichnesu li'azara, again from the time that it enters the Azara. V'hanocha lo ma'akev es klal, it sounds like from that statement that placing it before the Mizbeach is not ma'akev at all, and so there's a contradiction again, both by Kriya and with regards to Hanocha. And the Gemara continues and answers, Kriya akriya lo kasha, when it comes to the contradiction within whether the reading of the psukim is ma'akev, that is not difficult. Har Rabbi Shimon, har Rabbanan, in one case it's Rabbi Shimon, in one case it's the Rabbanan. In terms of Kriya, again, we did have a machlokas tanoim rather, on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, and so it just depends which Tana we are following. Hanocha nami lo kasha, when it comes to Hanocha as well, it is not difficult. Har Rabbi Yehuda, v'har Rabbanan, one is Rabbi Yehuda and one is the Rabbanan, as the Gemara will now explain. My Rabbi Yehuda, what Rabbi Yehuda are we talking about? The Tanya, because we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yehuda says v'hinachto, when it says in the pasuk v'hinachto, you'll place it zu tenufa, that actually refers to waving the bikurim. Ata omer zu tenufa, are you saying it's waving? Oeno ela hanocha mamish, or does it really mean placing? Kishu omer v'hinicho, when it says v'hinicho, hare hanocha omer, that's talking about placing it in front of the mizbeach. Hamani mekayim v'hinachto, so what do I do with v'hinachto? Zu tenufa, that refers to waving. And what the Gemara is saying over here is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you only have one pasuk v'hinicho that's referring to hanacha. The other pasuk of v'hinachto is referring to tnufa. In order for something to be ma'akev, the pasuk has to repeat it. It has to say it twice. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk does not say hanacha twice, and therefore hanacha is not ma'akev according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rashi explains, Rabbi Yehuda lo ma'akva hanacha. Again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, hanacha is not ma'akev. The dorish v'hinachto yiseru letnufa. He learns v'hinachto as waving. Ve'in mikra shonei behanacha la'akev. You don't have the pasuk repeating itself by hanacha that it should be ma'akev. Well, the Rabbanan the lo darshi le'lahachim iboilu l'shanos ba'hanacha li'akev. According to the Rabbanan, they're going to say you have it repeated by hanacha. Therefore, hanacha is mi'akev. And Rashi continues, v'hinachto zu tnufa, v'hinachto refers to waving, karibe v'hinachto lashon v'lo nachem elokim. It's like the language that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't guide them in that particular direction. That's what it means, v'hinachto. Also, it's like waving, shumanacho so la'arba rucho samala morid, that he's guiding it, so to speak, to the four directions and waving it up and down, so therefore v'hinachto can be a reference to waving. And the Gemara continues, Uman Tana de Poligole de Rabbi Yehuda. Who's the Tana that argues on Rabbi Yehuda? Who's the one that says that Hanocha is Ma'akev? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. That's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rashi explains, Man Tana de Poligole lememer Hanocha Ma'akev. Again, who's the Tana that says Hanocha is Ma'akev? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. It's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov de Nafkale Tenufa Mikra Achrina. As we're going to see, he learns Tenufa from a different pasuk, so he does have two psukim for Hanocha, for placing it. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, V'lokach hakohen hatenem yodecha, the kohen will take the basket from your hand. Limit al habikurim shetu'unin tenufa. This teaches that bikurim requires waving. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So you see, this is the source for waving. So again, you have the pasuk saying hanacha twice, which means that hanacha is ma'akev. And the Gemara now explains this drush of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. My time with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. What's the reason of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? What does this pasuk of v'lokach hakohen hatenem yodecha have anything to do with waving? The Gemara answers, Asya yad yad mishlam, it's exer shava, because it uses the word yad over here, v'lokach hakohen hatenem yadecha, and it also uses the word yad by shlomim. Ksiv hacha v'lokach hakohen hatenem yadecha, it says over here, the kohen will take the basket from your hand. Uchsiv, and it's also written by shlomim, Yodav Tiviena, as Ishay Hashem, it says Yodav Tiviena over there. It uses the word Yad, and so we can make a Gzeira Shava, we compare the two, and the Gemara continues and explains the comparison. Makan Kohen, just like over here, we're talking about the Kohen doing it, Aflahalan Kohen, so too the Kohen is involved by the Shlomim, and Malahalan Bailim, just like by the Shlomim, we're talking about the owners being involved, Afkan Bailim, so too by Bikurim, the owners are involved, Hakeitzat, so how so? They're both going to be involved in the waving. Meiniach Kohen Yadav Tachas Yedei Bailim, the Kohen places his hands underneath the hands of the owner, Umeinif, and then they wave together. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava Bar Ada, Amar Rav Yitzchak. Rava Bar Ada says that Rav Yitzchak says, Bikurim, when it comes to Bikurim, Rashi explains, Malahalan Bailim, just like over there we're talking about the owners, Dahu Bailim Mishtoi, because that pasuk is talking about the owners. Techsiv, because it's written, Yavias Karbono LaHashem Mizevach Shlomov, it says his carbon, talking about the owners. V'samech le Yodav Tiviena, then it says that pasuk of Yodav Tiviena, and we will continue this discussion in the next video on Daf Yotes Amud Aleph.